a lot of Americans who are getting close to retirement age have nowhere near as much money as they need. They're going to be leaning more and more on Social Security. Social Security has a asset value or assets that are dropping, meaning they're paying out more money than they're bringing in, which means now if you're 30 years old, you're paying into Social Security. You're not paying for your retirement. You're paying for somebody else to retire. So what does that leave us?
So first of all, two things. First, home ownership, buying a home, that's not the American dream. I mean, that's the realtor's dream, right? It was a perversion of the American dream, that the American dream was just owning a home and then just getting rich because your home appreciates. The American dream meant that you can come to America and work hard and succeed. And you can earn enough money to buy a home, right? Not that the dream wasn't owning the home. The dream was to be able to afford to buy one because you came to a free country where you could rise as far as your talents and your ambition and your drive will take you, right? You weren't, your lot in life wasn't preconditioned based on who your parents were, or whether you were nobility or something, or whether you were, connected to the government, right? Everybody had a fair shot in America. I mean, if you worked hard and you were smart, you persevered, right? Anybody could get rich. Anybody can go from the mailroom to the boardroom, and you could get rich. And when you get rich, you buy a house. But they perverted the American dream, which was this: I'm going to buy a house. I don't have to work very hard. I just have to qualify for a mortgage, and then my house is going to go way up, and I'm going to get rich because I own a home. Right? that again, the realtors made this up, but it was possible because of the cheap money from the Fed that was inflating home prices, and the introduction of all kinds of government subsidies, guaranteed loans, and other programs that made it easier for people to pay higher prices for houses. And that kept pumping up prices so that people who already own homes could sell them for a larger amount of money, or could use them for collateral to borrow more money. But this is all part of the bubble, and part of the problem that we're dealing with. Social Security, that's another, problem, massive problem. It dates all the way back to the creation of the Ponzi scheme in the 1930s with Roosevelt. So before the 1930s, there was no Social Security. So the country made it from 1790 to 1834 or whatever it was, or 1934, without any Social Security. And in fact, Social Security didn't even apply to the self-employed until the mid-1950s. So if you ran your own small business, you weren't even part of the Social Security system. It was just people who had a job, right, a W-2 employees that were taking part. But the whole thing was a lie because they pretended it was insurance. They said you were paying premiums and there was some kind of trust fund, but it was all a lie. Nobody paid a premium, they paid a tax. There is no real trust fund. The government just spends all the money. Social Security is not funded like a private sector retirement program. In fact, if the private sector ran a retirement program the way the government runs Social Security, they'd all be in jail because they're running a Ponzi scheme, and Ponzi schemes are illegal. But this is an intergenerational Ponzi scheme, and we're on the verge of complete implosion. The baby boom, and I am at the tail end of the baby boom. I was born in 1963. The last boomer was born in 1964. Right? And so I'm 61. And so I'm almost at retirement age, right? Some people don't retire until 67, to 70, but most of the baby boom has already entered retirement. But the rest of us are chasing it pretty quick, right? We're going to get there. There's no money. In fact, these phony Social Security trust funds, the way the trust funds worked is the government would collect Social Security taxes, then pay out the benefits. And if there was any money left over, the government borrowed it out and put an IOU in the trust fund, a government bond. So any extra money that was left over, the government just spent it on other programs. And so there's no money there. The government took it all. And, right now, the Social Security funds are actually collecting less in taxes than they're spending already. So the system already doesn't work. And so what the government is doing now is they're taking the treasury bonds that are in those trust funds and they're selling them into the market. So in addition to the national debt, right, where we have to sell $2 or $3 trillion a year of treasuries to fund the national debt, the Social Security trust funds are also selling treasuries to the same pool of buyers to pay Social Security. See, Social Security used to help fund the deficit. Now it's competing, and we have a bigger deficit because of the selling of treasuries out of these phony trust funds. And so that's another part of this debt, bomb that's about to go off, because the biggest buyers of our debt used to be the Fed, foreign central banks, and government trust funds. Government trust funds are selling, the Fed is selling, and foreign central banks aren't buying. The next thing is they're going to really start selling. So this whole bond bubble collapses, and either interest rates skyrocket or inflation skyrockets, because the Federal Reserve prevents rates from skyrocketing by printing even more money to buy up the bonds that everybody else is selling. And they reverse course, and they go from quantitative tightening back to quantitative easing on steroids, and then inflation goes through the roof. But Social Security was a horrible idea. It was sold to the public as a lie. They never would have approved it had the government been honest about its financing. But it's unconstitutional. The government should not be involved in this. People should save for their own retirement. They would do a much better job than the government, because the government didn't save a nickel. They took everybody's money and then spent it all. But if people had their Social Security taxes and what the employer paid on their behalf, which would have been theirs if the employer didn't send it to the government instead of the worker, they could have built a real retirement nest egg. Instead, they depend on a government Ponzi scheme, which unfortunately, isn't going to work, because it's done. The thing is unraveling as we speak, and people think, well, it's going to be a problem for the future when the trust funds run out of money. They're already broke, and the only money they have is government debt that they sell.
And that really becomes a cyclical issue, like what you're talking about, because everybody who's on Social Security, dependent on Social Security, is hoping for bigger Social Security checks. But if the fund doesn't have any Social Security money to pay out, what do? You got to print more money to pay out bigger Social Security checks, which means, hey, you got a bigger Social Security check. But then that at the same time makes inflation worse.
The problem with people on Social Security, or who are close to Social Security, is that's the most important position for a candidate to get their vote. So if you indicate that Social Security is being cut, you're not going to get the votes of the people who are collecting Social Security or who expect to be collecting Social Security anytime soon. And so nobody will cut Social Security, which means everybody's Social Security is going to get massively cut by inflation. I mean, that's the only politically viable way to deliver the pain, because the politicians don't want to be the actual messenger of that pain. They shoot the messengers. And in the case of politicians, they don't reelect them. And so when they create inflation, as I said earlier, they can blame it on other things, greedy corporations, OPEC, Putin, whatever they want. But people are going to see the value of their Social Security payments destroyed, because the only alternative is that they don't get the money in the first place. But there's no way they're going to get the purchasing power they expect, because the government can't afford it. Now, they can also have significant increases in the payroll tax, but no politician wants to propose that either, or the people who pay that tax won't vote for them. So they can't raise taxes, they can't cut spending, so all they can do is create inflation, which is what they're going to do, which is, again, why I'm saying that people need to protect themselves from this inflation tax, and they need to get those protections in place as quickly as possible. We're running out of time here for you to buy gold. I mean, it's $2,400. That may seem expensive, but it's actually very cheap, especially relative to where it's about to go. And I think you can get there very quickly. So people need to buy gold. They need to buy silver, maybe even more so. Silver is about $28. It was $24 a couple of weeks ago, but it was $50, in 2011. It was $50 in 2008. Not many things that you can buy for half the cost of what it was in 2008. So silver is one of those things. But one by one, look what's happened to coffee. Look what's happened to cocoa. I mean, prices are just skyrocketing. I mean, this is going to be like a dominoes of big price increases. And people need to get their portfolios ready for the new era. You can't hold the Magnificent Seven anymore. You can't hold the NASDAQ It's like holding the Nifty 50 stocks from the 1960s throughout the entirety of the 1970s. You got your ass handed to you if you stayed with Polaroid and Xerox and those kind of names. The people that made money in the stagflation decade of the 70s, they owned gold and silver. They owned gold stocks. They owned oil stocks, agricultural stocks. They owned foreign stocks. They had money in Japan. They had money in Germany. That's what you need to do. You need to have a 70s portfolio, only even more so, because the problems that the U.S. faces today are far more severe than the problem we had in 1970. And the inflationary consequences that are going to unfold in the decade ahead are going to be much worse and have much more profound implications for your investment. So it's even more important that you get it right. Remember, during the 70s, gold went from $35 an ounce to $800.
Wow.
Right. So, that was a big, big move. Oil prices went from $3 a barrel to $30 a barrel. That's a tenfold increase. So think about, how your world would look if oil prices went up tenfold.
Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.